Welcome back to This Week on MTGA. I'm your host, krowz, and today we are going to be going over everything that happened this past week on MTG Arena, and most notably, the release of new spoilers from March of the Machines, the upcoming set, and the new card type, Battles. But before we jump into that, we should start things off by addressing the controversy from the previous week with Ninja's Kunai. So this past week, the Ninja's Kunai bug and apparently Blazing Torch, which I was not aware of. I don't really know what that bug entails, but those bugs have been fixed with the update, and Magic the Gathering Arena over on Twitter mentions that players found to be exploiting the issue have been or will soon be suspended, with times varying based on the degree of abuse as well as being skipped for any qualifications or plan points from season leaderboards. So, a decent response. It took them a long time to address the issue, but they got it done. They are punishing the players, I guess. I don't really know how to feel about it. It's a tough issue to kind of tackle about like what kind of punishment to give players. So all in all, I guess it's a good enough response. I am okay with it. I have not experienced any losses from playing against Ninja's Kunai. Thankfully, I'm not really sure what those players who have been affected by the issue are thinking about this response, but it seems to be totally reasonable. Either way, let's jump into some other rewards that we just received from that update as well. As you can see in front of you, these are the rewards that we got for last week's update. Now, we're not exactly sure what these are for. They could be for the Ninja's Kunai bug, or they could just be for the revamped beginner or new player experience on MTG Arena that they integrated last week. And yeah, essentially, we got the 5 card sleeves, Teferia mode, 5 jump-in tokens, which is pretty decent, 3 boosters, and 600 gems, which is kind of a decent chunk of rewards, honestly, but we're still not sure exactly what they're for. Either way, I'm sure we can all appreciate some free stuff, especially gems, and that is going to do it for the section on Ninja's Kunai. Now let's move on to a smaller section about one specific player who found an exploit that will force your opponent to concede. So I'm not going to be playing the video because I feel pretty uncomfortable sharing like really large exploits. I don't want to propagate the exploit at all, but you can go ahead and check it out yourself if you're really that curious. Either way, Daniel Mayer over here on Twitter is basically contacting MTG Arena saying that he figured out how to make an opponent auto-concede the game, and basically saying that if they want to reach out to him, he can give them the source and an explanation of how it can be mitigated. So at least he's trying to resolve the issue. And I guess it's probably a good thing that they be made aware that this is possible. Now, I'm not exactly sure how he's doing it because I don't really understand like the complex programming stuff, or it could be I think it's just modifying some type of code that is causing this to happen. Either way, this is just that small thing I want to throw in there, that if you somehow auto-conceded a game, well, somebody was using that against you, although I don't think anybody is actually exploiting or actually using this exploit, hopefully. And if they are, they should get severely punished, if not just complete, I would say just permabanned. Either way, that's it for this small section. Okay, the moment you've all been waiting for, I'm sure, is the release of new spoilers when it comes to March of the Machines, the upcoming MTG set, and more specifically, a type of card that is brand new. Let's jump right into it. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to take an example of a battle and just explain the mechanics, explain what I think about the card type in general. I'm not going to be reviewing the battles because I will need the full context of the set to do so. Essentially, I want to talk about how this affects the game potentially, and what I think the impact of battles overall is going to have on the standard metagame at least, or the way you play Magic in general. So here we have Invasion of Karsus. Basically, a battle has a front side and a flip side. The front side is the card you cast every time, and when you cast it, you get to choose another opponent. So you choose an opponent, and that opponent has to protect that battle. And you and other players can attack that battle, and when it's defeated, it exiles itself and transforms under the player's control that defeated the battle. So you or other players, if you're playing Commander, I guess. I only play Standard, so if you yourself give it to your opponent and you destroy the battle, then you get the creature for the most part that comes when it transforms. So how do you know how many life total points or whatever you need to deal to defeat the battle? Well, that's at the bottom left of the card. You see this little spiky 4, and that spiky 4 means it has 4 battle counters or something. I don't really know exactly the terminology, but essentially it has 4 life. And when you deal 4 damage to it, well, you get Refraction Elemental, which is a 4/4 with ward pay 2 in this case. And whenever you cast a spell, Refraction Elemental deals 2 damage to each opponent. So essentially, usually that creature is relatively good and is worth fighting for the most part. I mean, let's just assume that that's the case for all battles, because otherwise, why would you play a battle if the transformed card is not good? But in this case, you have a 4 mana battle, which is a sorcery. Basically, you can only cast at sorcery speed. You choose your opponent, and then when it enters the battlefield, it deals 3 damage to each creature and planeswalker. So you get a sweeper, a 3 damage sweeper, which is kind of like, this is so slightly weaker than a card like a sorcery that would do the same effect, like Storm's Wrath, I think it was, that was 4 mana, essentially dealing 4 damage to each creature and planeswalker. So you get a slightly weaker spell usually, and you give it to your opponent, it sweeps the board, and then you get to potentially attack it. You deal 4 damage to it, or any amount of, well, at least 4, then you get that elemental. So this is really cool. I love the flavor of battles, and especially this specific flavor text of Siege. So in March of the Machines, you're fighting a battle, but most importantly, you're sieging it. It is a siege because you're trying to destroy that the card. Basically, you're trying to destroy the card, so you're sieging that card. I found that to be really cool flavor wise, and like a really cool concept in a card game of creating a different objective that you can attack, and if you win that battle, basically you get a reward out of it. I find that to be super cool, and I really like the card type on paper. I don't really know how it's going to impact the game in practice, other than I think these are just straight up good cards. Like most of the battles that are going to see play are essentially a good spell with upside. So you don't have to attack the battle, but even the fact that you have the option of attacking the battle means that that card already gains extra value over a spell that just does the front side, right? So I find that to be really cool. It's a lot of value. I feel like the game is definitely moving towards more and more and more value, which could be a good thing, could be a bad thing. The problem with moving towards really high power creep, I think, this is kind of power creep, I would say. Moving towards really high power creep or a lot of value or spells that do multiple things, it's a problem with balancing those cards, because the more powerful card is, the harder it is to like make sure it's not so overpowered that it creates problem for the game. Now, this card specifically, I think is okay. We have Brotherhood Zen for 3 that essentially does the exact same thing. So paying a premium and then having to attack it could be like a good enough, like it could be well costed enough where this is not a problem. I'm not here to really evaluate the card, but I think that if we are moving in towards a world where battles are being played a lot, then, and I think we are moving in that direction, because the battles, from what I've seen, they have really decent effects. Like they're probably worth playing, and I feel like they are going to see play, and I hope they do, because otherwise that would be kind of a failure of like card design in general. So I think it's going to impact the game. I really like this type of card over, let's say, Planeswalkers, because they don't actually generate more value unless you do something else. And I feel like it's kind of adding more decision making. I feel like whenever you add more decision making to a card game, it's usually a good thing, as long as it doesn't go too far and it like scares away new players. But this is straightforward. You create an objective, you can attack it, you can attack your opponent instead if you want, and you get a reward for that. And I find that to be really interesting. So I do think this will change the game in not a major way, but this will definitely add another layer to standard, at least, and hopefully maybe it sees play in other formats. But I feel like that extra layer of strategy that I hope this brings to the table is a really good thing for the game, making the overall decision making matter more potentially. I hope this is the case. Like this is what I'm feeling on a surface level from just seeing the card type and thinking about how this could potentially affect the game. Like the decision between dealing damage directly to your opponent and potentially destroying a battle, I find it to be pretty interesting. But I feel like it depends wildly on the deck you're playing, because obviously in an aggro deck, you would probably just want to deal damage phase, right? So that's not really where it's interesting. I find it more interesting in like a mid-range deck. In a mid-range deck, sometimes hitting your opponent in the face is actually more valuable. But the fact that you have the choice to either hit your opponent in the face or the battle, I love that already. I love thinking about that. And I really hope that this brings what I think it will bring to the table, as in just make it make the game more strategical, a little bit more strategical, not a lot, but or maybe a lot actually. I'm not sure of the impact. I'm not sure. I really hope this is the case, because I love the idea of battles, and I love just imagining like the card type battle. It's so cool. It's probably the coolest thing that they've added in the game from when I started playing. I just find the concept to be extremely cool. Like objectives in a card game, I find that's so amazing. I think I would even argue that eventually they should make a card type. Well, yeah, it could be a battle, but not a siege, right? Like it could be a battle where you play it and both players can attack it. And then whoever wins that battle and kills it first, well, gets the reward. Because this is specifically a siege, right? So they still have wiggle room to do like battle, like war or something. And then that creates like a whole new plane of strategy. That could be really cool. And maybe the player who casts the war has like a huge advantage where maybe the next turn their opponent can't like attack it immediately, because otherwise it's a downside, right? If you consider the fact that you had to spend mana for the war and your opponent can attack it immediately, maybe they just cannot attack it on that one turn and you get initiative on your next turn to attack that battle or something along those lines. There's probably a way to do it. I'm really excited for the future of the card type battle. I really hope they expand on it, because I feel like this is the direction the game should be going, instead of going into like Fable the Mirror Breaker sagas, instead of going into like ridiculous planeswalkers and stuff like that. Going for something that feels like you have to work a little harder for the value that it might bring to the table is really interesting, and I absolutely love it. I'm in love with battle. I mean, it is what it is. Either way, I hope you enjoyed my little sneak peek of battles and what I think they'll bring to the table. And I hope you're as excited as I am for these new card types. All right, and that is going to be the end of today's show. If you enjoyed it, of course, click on that like button and leave a comment down below if you have suggestions for how to improve it or whatever you want me to cover potentially next week. But yeah, this is a really fun concept. I really enjoy doing these, and I hope you guys are all enjoying it as well. And of course, thank you to all the patrons that are supporting me over on patreon.com/krowzmtg. I really appreciate that, since it's very encouraging and it's helping me a lot on the path to becoming a content creator for Magic the Gathering. So, of course, thank you all, and I will see you all in the next one.